Hey folks, Pastor Rocky Branch getting a little coffee candy this morning. You know, everything has been changed. Now you can get coffee in a, what is this? A lozenge, I guess, a piece of candy. Anyway, I hope you're doing well today. I guess it would be rude for me to put that in my mouth talking to you, so I'll keep my mouth open. Hopefully something besides hot air will come out. You know, one of the things that happens to us is that life changes. And as life changes, of course, we get challenged by those changes. Because if you're like me, you don't like to change a lot of things. I mean, some things are okay to change, you know. I mean, I'm grateful we don't have to always cook on a wood stove. I'm grateful that we have electricity and we have air conditioning. But, you know, I just don't like some of the changes that we've had. It's not that I'm opposed to change. It's just that I don't like some of them. You know, in the Bible, there's a story about Joseph. You know, he was the son of Jacob. And Joseph, of course, was sold into slavery because of his brothers' envy, and his brothers hated him. And so they sold Joseph into slavery. And then, of course, as you know the story, number of years passed by and Joseph was elevated. I mean, he went in as a slave and he worked for Potiphar, and then he went to prison. And then he was elevated out of prison and ended up becoming actually the right-hand man to Pharaoh in Egypt. He really became the prime minister of the whole land of Egypt. Well, the family, his dad, brothers, the famine was great in the land, as you remember, and they had to come to Egypt to get food. Everybody had to come to Egypt. Well, Joseph is there, and his brothers don't recognize him, but Joseph does recognize his brothers. Well, you know the story, hopefully. If not, you ought to read it, beginning in the 17th chapter or the 31st chapter of Genesis. It's crazy. It's a crazy story. But Jacob, or what happens is when Joseph's family finally comes in or gets ready to come in, as Joseph exposes himself to his brothers of who he really is. And after all these years, 30 years now this has been, and Joseph looks at his brothers because they had sold him when he was just a kid into slavery because of envy. Joseph looks at his brothers and says, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." And now God had elevated Joseph in a dynamic way, and his family was brought into Egypt. They lived in the land of Goshen, and they were given the rights to the kingdom because of Joseph. Well, let me ask you today, perhaps someone in your life, perhaps something that you've been involved with, somebody came against you in a strong way. Somebody tried to hurt you. Somebody tried to work well, just directly against you. They wanted to harm you. And you maybe have been holding that in. But God has seemingly blessed and you have been okay, even though you've been challenged by some of these things. Now, it could be thoughts, it could be actions, it could be relationships broken. It could be a lot of things. But maybe there's something, as the old timers used to say, that's in your craw a little bit that you just can't shake loose. Now, the Bible calls this term a stronghold. It's something that you've tried to get loose from, and you just can't shake it loose. It just hangs on. Well, there's some people that don't want to get loose from it. They just don't like it, and they're not going to change about it. And the person could apologize 1,000 times, and they'd still be upset. Well, in this particular story, Joseph says to his brothers, you know, what you meant for evil when you tried to sell me into slavery and get rid of me and so forth and so on, God took that and turned it into good. Now, let me ask you this morning, how many things has God taken in your life that happened to you? Maybe not getting a job, maybe a bad marriage, maybe a bad relationship, maybe a bad business venture, maybe just bad decisions. And God has taken that and turned it into good for you. Now, think about that before you jump off the handle here and get upset about somebody that's done something to you. Think about how many times God has blessed you, even though you've made mistakes, even though I've made mistakes, even though someone else has made mistakes against us. How many times has God blessed you? I'm certain there's been a few. I know in my life there have been many. I want to tell you, beloved, today that many times people work against us and they mean it for harm. But God always can take the situation you're in and turn it around and mean it for good because He's in control. He will give you the grace to endure hardship, and He will give you the blessings to receive mercy. And He'll also remind you that you must give mercy. Now, please hear me. Many times we hold spite, anger, and hostility inside of our hearts, and we will not forgive others that have come against us. Even though we came out all right, even though we were blessed in the process, we still hold envy. Now, is that very human? Well, absolutely. I mean, there's times that things happened years ago. Now, hear me. Things that happened years ago that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, whop, it comes straight into my mind, and I'm right back years ago in a situation where someone did me wrong, and I, if not careful, can get furious quickly. You say, Rocky, is that true? Absolutely true. I have to beat the devil down and tell him to back up. Why? Well, because our battle is in the mind, beloved. You see, God can take your situation and turn it around if you'll just let Him do it. But you have to be willing to let Him do it. What people meant for evil, God can turn into good if you'll just let Him do it. How do you do that? Well, day at a time. Day at a time, just reflect on how good God has been to you and extend the same mercy to someone else. You say, well, I'm not going to extend mercy to them. Do you know what they did to me? No, I don't, but I know what God's done for you. And I know what God's done for me. We're still here. He's had mercy. He's had grace. And so we have received freely. We should give freely. So pass it on. God will bless you for it. Break the strongholds by the power of the victory that Christ has already provided. And God will make a way for you. So, in the process of doing that, I'm going to have my piece of candy this morning. And I hope that you just remember that in some places, well, God can just do more than we can. Accept what God wants to do, and He'll bless you for it. God bless you. We love you. And goodbye. That's pretty good.